Just gonna turn down the music a little bit. Yeah, I was seriously debating at the last minute if I should postpone this stream. I have a meeting next week, though, unfortunately, because, well, apparently there's some significant stuff going on south of the border here. By the way, to my American friends, whenever you're going to watch this, are you guys doing okay down there? Because, whoa, I thought we were a banana republic up here in Canada, but you guys just said hold my beer with today. Anyway, yeah. Also a little cold here, global warming and whatnot. It's kind of chilly today, but yeah. Tonight, just finishing up the series on hazard identification, assessment, and control. And it's been fun. Can't say it hasn't been a lot of work. I did a lot of prep leading up to it, and it's still been a lot of work correcting some of the things as I've been preparing for each stream. But anyway, regardless, welcome. For and wherever you are is going to be dependent on whenever you are, if it's evening or morning or what have you. Also, too, is if you're catching this later on as a recorded stream, welcome. Please leave me a comment. I appreciate all of the comments I get. I want to know what you think and what's on your mind. I do appreciate it, and I do try to answer comments when I can get the time, of course. Yeah, so without any further ado, let's get into it right off the bat here. This series is on hazard identification, assessment, and control. And this is episode 7, which is different hazard assessments. And with the thumbnail, I had the why. And, well, variety. That's why. And so when we're really thinking about it, it's not necessarily one size fits all. And that's the confusing thing that a lot of people get hit with. They think that everything should be one size fits all and everything is easy. And really and truthfully, that can't be the case with hazard assessments. It shouldn't be the case with anything, any component of your safety management system. Your safety management system should never be a cookie cutter solution. And it shouldn't necessarily be a one size fits all, because it should grow with your business and organization. And maybe, unfortunately, sometimes it might have to contract with your organization. But anyway, yeah, let's get into it and talk about the chat rules. And they're fairly simple. Participate. Introductions are nice. If you're in the chat and catching this live, introduce yourself. And if not, you're catching it later, I appreciate comments when I get them too. So let me know who you are and if you're brand new to the channel, and let me know that in the comments as well. The other thing is ask and answer questions. By all means, your opinion counts and it's appreciated. Also, when there's questions asked and you might be able to answer something from your jurisdiction, your locale, and especially if there's differences, it's interesting in finding out. But above all, be civil, okay? Let's be professional here. No name calling, no insults. And the other thing to note on professionalism, this isn't considered professional advice. There's no contracts being signed, no money changing hands, and it's not a formal class, at this point anyway. Those sort of things may change. We'll see, but right now, this is sort of my test run, my first time doing this sort of thing, a running series on one subject. Other than the safety culture series that I'm going to revive. I just found trying to make videos, shorts, and this live stream and another live stream, it was too much. Yeah. So anyway, for those of you that are just joining for the first time, here's the process. And this process will be mimicked in other live streams because, yes, I'm going to do more. Going to have always a recap of the previous episodes. Going to be a presentation and lecture. During that time, you're going to find that there's going to be a short quiz at the end. 5-6 questions or whatever. And if you don't have time and you want to catch them in the short form videos that I put out later on, that's usually what I do. I sometimes put them in the community tab as well. I do answer chat questions as they come in. It doesn't look like there's a lot of people in the chat today. Might be because there's something significant happening south of the border, and that's interesting them. Maybe. I'm just going to go out on a limb. Or I'm boring, one or the other. And also, common questions will be answered in subsequent episodes. Because this is the last one in the series, what I will do is continue to answer questions on this series in subsequent live streams. And so I'll always have, and what I'll do is I'll start putting a Q&A at the end of every live stream, and I'll take that opportunity to answer those questions in different live streams. So there you go. So just as a quick recap, what we've gone over so far, in the beginning, we talked about what is a hazard, and we defined it, talked about your safety management system has to define it, maybe personalize it for you. And we categorized hazards, fitting them into 2 classes, health and safety, and then categories, physical, chemical, biological, and psychosocial. Because if you're not properly identifying hazards, then you're likely not going to be implementing the correct controls. We also talked about risk, hazard, consequences, and the difference, ensuring that you know the difference. Because often people will look at the consequence as the hazard when it's not. Yes, you may break your leg falling, but what caused the fall? What was it? A tripping hazard? What was it? Missing railing on stairs or whatever the case may be? That's the actual hazard. Don't equate it with the consequence. And of course, the risk, the probability that that hazard is going to manifest itself into that consequence, um, for want of better terms. And then, of course, quantifying the risk, giving the risk an actual numerical value to either the hazards themselves or the hazards and the risks, and running the whole gamut of even quantifying hazard, risk, and controls. And because what it does is it helps to make that actually a data-driven decision versus something that's anecdotal. Yes, there's always going to be some subjectivity, but it lends more objectivity than just saying, hey, this is a hazard, these are controls. Quantifying it so it's no longer your opinion. And then, of course, applying those hazard and risk controls. Because once correctly identified and assessed for risk, hazards can be controlled properly. The common misconception around this, of course, is elimination, and then you don't have to worry about it. Well, yes and no. You've eliminated the hazard, but you can't necessarily eliminate the task, especially if it's operational crucial. And then beyond that, what happens is people lump substitution and elimination in it. It doesn't really work, because if you've eliminated the hazard or eliminated the task as a result, then the point becomes moot. But if you've substituted the hazard, then it still has to be assessed. You still have to do an assessment on that task and assess it for the new hazard substitution, and then quantify it and then input the controls. So you can't necessarily say that elimination and substitution are the same. And then, of course, we apply the hierarchy of controls. Engineering, forming that barrier or isolating the worker from the hazard, or putting a barrier between the worker and the hazard. Administrative controls, influencing, guiding, directing the worker behavior. And finally, PPE, personal protective equipment, gloves, hard hat, glasses, ear protection, etc. Putting that barrier, but it's close to the worker. PPE is worn on the worker, and it's the lowest in the hierarchy of controls. And then putting it all together in job hazard assessments, or job safety analysis, or job hazard analysis, or, we could go on and on. The whole thing is it's a formal, in other words, recorded on a form, assessment of the job for the tasks being performed, the hazards associated with those tasks, quantifying them to calculate and consider risk, and then applying controls. And all of that is put and recorded on a form. And it doesn't really matter if it's paper form, electronic form, data management, nobody cares. The big thing is, does it get done? And of course, you can get advanced, and in last episode, we introduced an advanced method where we quantified the controls as well, and it provided us the opportunity to reassess for adequate control of that hazard afterwards. And it gives you that little bit extra to maybe plan your work better, and maybe if you're considering and eliminating tasks, it helps with that. So just as an aside, something else to think about in that. Now, let's get on a little further. The question people always ask is, why do we need to use different methods? Doesn't one size fit all? Well, that being the case, then I guess hiking boots would fit all feet. I have a buddy in Down Under. His name's Dan, and he's a giant. And whereas I'm a runt, I'm like 5'6 3/4" on a good day, and he's a whole foot taller than me. We can guarantee that we can't wear the same shoes. Okay? So one size does not fit all. And so think about this. Here's my question back. What about a situation that's out of scope, out of the ordinary? You've already assessed everything in your formal hazard assessment, and you've considered each job and position for the tasks that are being performed, the hazards associated with the tasks, and the necessary controls. And now you have something out of scope. Let's say that it's a renovation being done on your office, your workspace, your manufacturing plant, whatever the case may be. Is your formal hazard assessment going to work for that? Because your job safety analysis, your job hazard assessment, captures everything in the normal scope of duties. Okay, am I confusing anything? I hope I gave you a good explanation. Or let's talk about this. Let's say that you're now going to expand, and you're now before you were doing repairs in your a garage type or an equipment repair plant, and you were doing repairs in-house, but now you're going to expand and do things out in the field. Well, that's a whole lot different because it's out in the field. And so now you're going to have to assess those hazards where you are, because now the mechanic's going to be working in the weather, traveling, etc. So all sorts of new hazards to consider. So thinking about that out of scope activity, you can't necessarily use the same process, can you? Just the same as, let's say you put your tool pouch down, go for lunch. When you come back to work, has anything changed? Well, would your normal job hazard assessment or formal hazard assessment fit in? That might be a bit arduous to whip it out and start going through everything. We'll talk about that, okay? So let's move on. So just as a recap, just as a quick review, what a hazard assessment is. So it's a procedure designed to identify, assess, and manage health risks and safety hazards in the workplace. That's it. Now, that's the definition. Doesn't mean that there's different ways to apply that definition. Okay? And now here's the next question. Do I need to assess hazards all the time? These are some of the ones that I've received in the past and I still get today. Now, as safety professionals, we've likely heard all questions that are similar to this, or a bunch of questions similar to this. Or we've also heard the excuse, look, you know what? I really don't have time for this. I've got work to do as well. Well, on that note, well, as long as that work isn't creating hazards or making existing ones worse, then I guess we really have nothing to worry about, do we? Right? And that's the mistake people continue to make, is they often think that this hazard assessment thing is one and done. We do that initial, we go through all of that paperwork, we do it, and then we're good. It doesn't work that way. Let's put it into some other considerations. Like, you wash your truck once, does that mean you never have to wash it again? You do an oil change once, does that mean you never have to do it again? Things change. It's important here to consider that one size does not fit all. You have different tools in your toolbox, so the same should be considered with hazard assessments. And so we're going to look at 4 different types. Yes, I know, you're thinking, oh God, 4? Yeah, so yeah, let's jump in. So the first one, when we want to think about them, is an out-of-scope hazard assessment. Also called a site-specific hazard assessment, also called a field-level hazard assessment. Some people just refer to this as the JSA for a certain job, but I really don't. But it's for out-of-scope, out of unusual work, and I'm going to talk more about it in a bit. Another one that's very similar is a job-specific. I certainly don't use it very much. I know some colleagues do. I put them usually, the first one and the second one, out of scope and job specific together, but there's some groups that do separate it, so that's why I'm going to talk about it. The next one is a high risk or complex task hazard assessment. And like I said, I'll talk about that a bit more. And then of course the informal one. So we're going to check out each one in depth. So first one is the out of scope. Now, many different terms, like I've said, out of scope hazard assessment, site-specific, field-level hazard assessment. This is used, once again, for out-of-scope activities and situations. You have repairs being done, and or renovations being done, and their outside contractors come in to do them and work on things. So what about the hazards that they're creating and how that affects the employees that are adjacent or close to or in the proximity of those hazards that are being generated? That's something to consider and think about, and that's why you do that. Now, this is just temporary. This is just used for those out-of-scope situations. However, as a good rule of thumb, and we'll talk about that in a bit, and I'll start now, if you're repeating it at set intervals, maybe you might want to consider adding it to your formal hazard assessment. Okay? The other thing that needs to be noted is it needs to be updated as conditions change. So if you have a situation and for whatever reason, things change. Contractors working and they've hoarded in one area, and all of a sudden they've come to you and said, oh, look, we found some more stuff we got to do. We got to expand our hoarding. We got to expand our barrier. So now all of a sudden your field level or site-specific hazard assessment should change as well. It needs to be updated. Or if it has to do with something outside, then it needs to be updated. Or let's say that you've done one for a mechanic that's going to go out and repair a bunch of equipment at one site, at a mine site, a rig site, whatever the case may be. And the project manager has already gone out there and done a quick bid or whatever the case may be. Or the mechanic's been out there a couple of weeks beforehand, they did a field level hazard assessment. But all of a sudden, it's rained for the last 2 days. Is that hazard assessment going to change? The other thing is you should time limit them. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. The other thing is it needs to be signed off. It needs to be signed off by all of the workers involved, plus the person or persons that were making it up. Okay, and they should be directly involved with the work and have an intimate knowledge of the work. Once again, if you're getting somebody that's not associated with the work to make up the hazard assessment, you're doing yourself and the work and the safety management system an injustice. So don't do that. Okay, now once again, it's simple. Hazards, controls. No need to quantify anything, because that's the idea, is you're noting it, the hazards, you're putting the controls in place. You don't have to necessarily quantify anything as far as how much the hazard is or how much the control is. It's just so you can be aware of these new hazards, because this is a temporary thing. And because it's temporary, it needs to be dated. Remember, some of the best defense of due diligence is dated, dependable, defendable documentation. So you date it, and realistically, you should put it into your practice. It should be part of your procedure, and if you're driven by policy, then it should be part of your policy that they expire after 24 hours or 48 hours and they need to be redone. Because things change. They're meant for an ever-changing worksite. Okay, and it has to once again be communicated to all of the workers involved. So there should be a sign-off sheet for the workers. So once again, I did mention needs to be signed off, right? Okay. Management or whatever manager is sponsoring the process needs to sign off on it. And that's pretty much it. Now, there's all sorts of forms and examples out there on the internet, so I didn't download any. It's really not a big deal, but there is lots. If people are interested and need to see something, by all means, put it in the comments and I'll do what I can to do another video and have a few links for you. Okay? Now, the next one, this is similar to the site-specific or out-of-scope hazard assessment, but this is job-specific, and it's tailored for a single job or project. Okay? So, you're going out and you're erecting a rig site, or you're going to go out and you're going to erect a temporary theater area or something like that for some sort of event that's going on, and then you're going to be taking it down. So your hazard assessment, this is single job or single project. Now, the other thing to note is that it has to be tailored for that single job, and it may include externals. Often, it's one of two things. It's often considered a job plan, or it becomes part of that job or project plan. I look at them more similar to a site-specific, but like I said, some of my colleagues just use a job-specific. That's what they title as, and they separate it, so that's why I'm including it. Just because I do something one way doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way, right? It would be a sad, sad world if we only had one way of doing things. Now, the other thing is, similar to the site-specific, it may change frequently depending on the state or progress of the job. and the coming of going of work parties, contractors, other people responsible for the project. Like say, for instance, like I said, erecting a venue for an event. You may have people that are coming in and doing the staging. You may have contractors that are coming in and hooking up all the electrical and the sound equipment. You may have others that are coming in who are going to be doing the seating and all of that other stuff. So whoever's planning that project will do that site-specific, or pardon me, that job-specific hazard assessment and work plan. But above all, beyond all, please keep it simple. Okay, because you're going to be conveying this information out to other parties. And one of the biggest problems that safety people will have is they make things far too complex when it isn't necessary. Keep it simple, stupid. Because if you don't, then you know what? Everybody ends up looking stupid. When you're doing whatever it is, if it's a site-specific hazard assessment or job-specific, or even a complex task hazard assessment that we'll talk about in a bit, keep it simple as possible. No need to overcomplicate things. Now, the next thing is high risk, and I said I was going to talk about it. It's often called a high-risk hazard assessment, complex task hazard assessment, high-risk, high-consequence hazard assessment. These are often mandated by legislation. Think about things where there's a huge consequence, or if things go wrong, going to be a severe consequence, like confined space entry, working at extreme heights, working with blasting, explosives, high voltage work, etc. So this is where you're going to be doing these very complex or high risk, high consequence activities. And like I said, they're usually mandated by legislation, depending on your jurisdiction, so check on it. Don't necessarily pick what I have to say as gospel. You want to make sure that when I'm giving you this information, I'm trying to talk as generic as possible, but it's important that you check out your own jurisdiction first and what they do. Because by all means, what I say about here in Alberta, or if I use British Columbia or Saskatchewan and Canada as a generality, or generalization, maybe I'm recoining a new word, I don't know, it might not apply to you. So make sure you check out your jurisdiction. Now, one of the things it usually requires a step-by-step plan or in phases. And it might be, because a lot of times, depending on the jurisdiction, you're going to have a confined space entry plan, and the hazard assessment will be part of it. Or some groups and organizations look at the hazard assessment as the whole plan. Either or, whatever the case may be, it's where there's a high consequence if things go wrong. And like anything else, once again, it's usually going to require updating as conditions change, depending on the length of the job that you're doing. It may require submission to external parties, for instance, depending on your jurisdiction. Sometimes in smaller venues, smaller areas, smaller towns, cities, etc., you might not have, or smaller companies might not have trained rescue people on staff or rescue personnel on staff. They may rely on local fire departments. And a lot of times your fire department, if they want to do high angle rescue, or they're going to be subject to doing confined space rescue, they're going to require your work plan, and they may require a 24-hour permit in advance, because they may have to know that they need to call you if they get called out on another emergency and say you're going to have to cease work. So just once again, check with your jurisdiction, because it's a good possibility that you may have to fall under some of that, okay? Once again, same idea as I was originally talking about, high risk, high consequence activities. So just to name a few: confined space entry, working at extreme heights where fall protection is going to be required, blasting, sometimes certain high energy work, etc. Okay? They should never be regurgitated. You shouldn't say, hey, this is a good one, I'm going to save it for the next job. No, these should be made up from scratch and planned out well. Not saying that you can't use the old one as a template, but they should never be regurgitated. Okay, because once again, we're talking about, oh, hi, Chris. You work as a safety professional, contractor in the construction industry. Thanks for the compliment. Yeah, glad you could join. Look forward to your feedback, etc. Yeah. And sorry if it took a while for me to notice you. But anyway, back to this. They should, because of the high consequence that's going to happen, and I'm talking possible worker fatality if you're not paying attention and you haven't assessed the hazards correctly. That's why you don't regurgitate these plans. That's why they have to be one and done. You can use them as, like I said, a template for creating the new one, but create the next one from scratch. And once again, has to be signed off by all parties. Ideally, if you want to follow best practices, there should be a manager or a senior company official endorsing this process. And for goodness sakes, don't forget, get your safety professional to weigh in too. Now, the next one is informal. And the reason it's informal, there's no form. Okay? And I'll give you some examples in a bit, but we do it frequently and every day. All of us do it. Where you're crossing a busy street. You look both ways. Yes, you've hit the crosswalk sign, but hey, I live in Calgary. I may have a good clear green light and a walking man and I can go across the street, but I'm still going to look both ways and make eye contact with the drivers. I've been to China. I've done the same thing. So you know what? You are doing it frequently. That's the process. It's simple. All you're doing is checking for hazards, applying whatever controls you're going to do, and then continuing on. So it's an observation of your work area, the tools, and the machinery. And it's just a quick look around. But because of it's a quick look around, you shouldn't be interrupted by distractions. Hold on, I have one here somewhere. You shouldn't be walking around your work site with this, because if you're looking down at this, you're not looking out there. Okay? Not saying that cell phones are a bad thing. They are a necessary part of the job in a lot of cases. But you shouldn't be distracted. So, think about your safety. Okay? And I've done videos in this in the past, so I'll just do a quick review. What I mean by your safety is this: yield to your surroundings. Okay? Whether you're coming back after lunch, have a quick look around. Did anything change while I was gone? Okay? Yield to your surroundings. Observe the environment, okay, and the work. Just take a quick look around, check it out. Oh, I never seen that dude in the forklift before. Right? Take a moment to understand the situation. I've told people in the past, it's okay to stop and think. Just remember to get started again. Okay? Understand the situation, then react accordingly. So here's a good example. And unless this is contrary to what your jurisdiction and the legislation says, take, for instance, a forklift. You're going to, at the start of your shift, you're going to take that checklist, you're going to do a good walk around, you're going to have a look at everything, check it off as you're looking at it, not just pencil whipping it. And then you're going to sign off and stick it behind the seat and everything's good and you're going to go. But you stop, you have a quick break, and you've parked the forklift. It's in the same place you parked it. Nothing has changed. Our meter says the same. You're still going to take a quick walk around it because you're going to want to check for leaks and everything else like that. That's the same thing. That's an informal hazard assessment. You don't have to record it unless, of course, your jurisdiction says you have to, in which case then do it. Okay? Same thing. You've dropped your tool pouch and parked your tools, unplugged stuff, gone for lunch, come back, had a good time talking to the boys, and now you're here back after lunch. Before you grab anything, you take a quick look around. Has anything changed? Or what's the weather like? Has the weather changed? Do you need to go get a raincoat? Or do you need to say, okay, you know what? Can't do this part of the job today. Got to go somewhere else. So once again, yield to your surroundings, observe the environment, and of course the work going on, the other workers, understand the situation, then react accordingly. And I don't mind. If anybody wants to steal that, I don't care. Yes, I made it up. I honestly don't care. I would prefer you give credit back to me. But if it saves the life of one worker, then you know what? It's all good. And here's the thing. What if we were to change the culture? What if we were to make this an organizational fit rather than just one about this health and safety folks, just one about the health and safety department? Because a lot of times people forget the internal responsibility system. They forget that everybody has a level of responsibility for health and safety. They forget that, and they just assume that, oh, well, Chris, the safety guy, is going to do it, or Kevin, the safety guy, is going to do it, or Kelly, the safety gal, is going to do it. No. Safety is everybody's responsibility. And so the more that we can, and hazard assessments are great because they raise that awareness, but they're also necessary components of your health and safety management system. I'm going to talk about that in a sec. But it's not a one and done. Continuous improvement is what drives that successful, not only the hazard identification, assessment, and control program, but your whole safety management system. It should be built on continuous improvement. What's working today might not be working tomorrow. Okay? And that's the important thing we all have to remember, is that just because it's working today doesn't necessarily mean it's working tomorrow. So before we get into quiz questions, you have to remember your hazard assessments are also a foundational part of your health and safety programs and your health and safety management system. So much so that they contribute to the other foundational components, okay? I've used this analogy lots when I've taught. And a health and safety management system is just like a human body if you know anything about anatomy. Our human body is made up of different systems. We have a central nervous system. We have neurological system that encompasses a lot more than that. We have a cardiovascular system, a respiratory system, genital urinary system, digestive system, etc. We have all of these systems working together. And when one is out of whack, the whole body is affected. Same thing, if you have one foundational part of your health and safety management system out of whack, the whole thing is affected. And your hazard assessments are that linchpin. They're that foundation of the health and safety management system. So let's look at what they're complementary to. And the very first thing is your inspections. Your hazard assessments are a snapshot in time, but based on them, that's part of what you should be using to design your inspections. They're part of what you should be monitoring on your inspections, because you want to be looking at things such as like safeguards and guarding that's in place on machinery, or the use of other controls such as safe work procedures. If your inspections aren't also noting how workers are performing their tasks, then you need to redesign them and add that component to it. And so some of the controls that are in the hazard assessment should be checked during your inspections, because that formal hazard assessment that we did in last October isn't due to be done till next October, but how are things working in between? So they form that foundation, and then your inspections can build on that by checking on that, okay? Incident investigations are part of the process. During investigations, hazard assessment should be some of the documentation that you're going to be checking and scrutinizing to see what should have been in place as far as controls. It helps you to set that baseline. Often incidents occur, in fact, most of the time they occur because of the absence of controls or the failure of controls or non-compliance in not using them. Once investigations are completed, though, often there's going to be some need for either modification of existing controls or putting new controls in place, or maybe taking some controls away because they were part of the problem to begin with. Just saying. Next thing is contractor management. When you're hiring contractors, you need to set your existing health and safety management system as the baseline on how you select contractors, who you hire, and how you manage them. Your health and safety, or your hazard assessments, are a big part of that. So you should be comparing yours to theirs. And yes, theirs might outshine yours. No problem. but it gives you at least a baseline on who to hire. Because if you hire somebody and you find, well, I just want to have a look at your safety management system. My what? I want to have a look at your safety management system. I don't have one. Oh, do you want to hire them? Or you might have to, you might want to hire them. They do really good work, but you might have to manage them a whole lot more because of it. The other thing is work planning. And really and truthfully, when it gets down to it, enough said. If you're not planning your work and considering the hazards around the work that you're going to be doing, why did I waste the last 6 weeks doing this? So they should be part of how you plan your work. As I said before, whoever's going to be the project manager, if you're going to go out and view the site and you're having a look at the potential job and how you're going to bid on it, the hazard assessment is going to have to start there. Okay? That's part of the initial hazard assessment, is the inception of the project and the project planning. If you're not doing that, then it's all for naught. And then finally, and this is a part I don't like to talk about, but it's a fact of life, is performance management. Sometimes you have to manage those, well, less than performers. But what about those folks that are really good workers, but they're not using the controls that you're like, your hazard assessments outline the controls that they need to be doing to perform their tasks safely. But you're always going to get those people that are, I don't need to do that. Never happened to me before. These controls slow me down, etc. We've heard all the excuses. But your hazard assessments give you the material to properly manage your team, your group, your crew, your company as far as safety goes. They set that baseline of what your expectation is as a supervisor or a team lead, a boss, a manager, a CEO. Okay? So let's get into some questions. Okay? What type of hazard assessment would you use during workplace renovations? Is it A, the normal formal one, a B, an out-of-scope or site-specific hazard assessment, sometimes called a field-level hazard assessment, C, the informal hazard assessment, or D, none of the above? Now, remembering once again, we have renovations, so a renovation is not a normal work thing. It's out of scope, it's unusual. So the answer is, you're going to use B, the out of scope or site-specific hazard assessment. The next question, what type of hazard assessment would you use for confined space work? Okay, would it be an out-of-scope field-level hazard assessment or a site-specific hazard assessment? Would you use B, a complex or high-risk or complex task hazard assessment? Would it be C, just use your formal hazard assessment that you've already done? Or would it be D, none of the above? So once again, thinking about it like this. Confined space entry has got a lot of risk to it, more risk than normal work because we're entering a confined space. So the answer is complex or high risk hazard assessment. Next one, what kind of control is a soft wrist pad along the edge of the desk? Oh, sorry, you can't see that. I'm running my hands along the edge of my desk. Is it A, is it PPE? Is it B, an administrative control? Is it C, an engineering control? Or is it D, all of the above? And just stopping and thinking about it for a sec, is it something that's worn on the worker? No, it's not. Is it something that directs or guides or influences worker behavior? No, it's not. Is it something that's forming a barrier between the hazard and the worker? Hint, that sharp edge of the desk. So the answer is, it's C, an engineering control. what type of hazard assessment will workers use when crossing the laydown area of a site? So they're just walking along and just going to cross the area where all the equipment and the materials are coming in and getting laid down. So what type of hazard assessment would workers use when they're crossing that laydown area? I know some organizations don't allow crossing across them, but just some do. So anyway, would it be the A, formal hazard assessment? Would it be B, an out-of-scope or field-level hazard assessment? Would it be C, the informal hazard assessment, or would it be D, none of the above? So once again, thinking about it, the workers it's like crossing a street. They're just going to walk across the street. So they're going to be looking both ways. They're going to make sure that the forklift operator or the scissor lift operator or the zoom boom operator, whoever it is, has got their attention, or any trucks coming in. And they've got their attention, they stop, and then they're going to cross. So the answer is they would be using that informal hazard assessment. Next one. What type of hazard is exposure? Oh, I put to very mold. Oh, okay. To mold spores in a crawl space. I'll try that again. What type of hazard is exposure to mold spores in a crawl space? Is it A, a biological hazard? Is it B, a chemical hazard? Is it C, a noise-induced hazard? Or is it D, physical? Okay, so if we think about it, really and truthfully think about it, yes, a crawl space, it's not normally where you're going to work, but what's the hazard there? And the hazard, if we think about it, is a biological hazard, the mold spores, because that's what I asked about originally. Now, incidentally, here in Alberta, that exposure to the mold spores would actually make that crawl space a confined space versus a restricted space. Yeah, absolutely right, Chris. In Alberta here, we separate the two. Anything that is not normally used for worker occupancy and has limited or restricted egress and access into it, is they're going to call it a restricted space. And then if there's a presence of a hazard where it might be hazardous to or dangerous to human health, then it becomes a confined space. Whereas like in other jurisdictions, say like British Columbia, immediately to my west, is that the crawl space is a confined space. Unless, of course, it's under a school portable, in which case it's different, but that's trivia. Next question. And I ask this question every time because it's fundamental. Why is it important to correctly identify hazards? Is it A, correct identification helps in general workflow? Is it B, it isn't, as long as they're just mentioned and we're paying attention to them? C, proper identification will help to ensure correct control selection. Or D, none of the above. And the answer is C. Proper identification of hazards will help to ensure correct control selection. So, any questions? Anybody? I'll just turn the music up just a little bit. Thanks for those of you that have taken the time to join. For those of you that are going to view the live stream in as a recorded version, by all means, leave your questions in the comments. This is the last one for the Hazard Identification Assessment series. I will be doing a separate video where I'm going to talk about how to build your hazard assessment cheat sheet, but that's down the queue and it'll be coming. I have some other exciting news that I want to talk about in another video shortly. Maybe next week it'll come out. So yeah, some exciting news coming up with that as well. But if there's no other questions, no other comments, once again, Chris, thanks for introducing yourself. Where exactly are you from, Chris? Just so I find out. I think you said you're, and I might be mistaken, somewhere in South America? Just have to pause because it takes a bit for the everything to cycle through. But anyway, while Chris is waiting to answer, what's up next? What's coming up next? It all depends on you. Texas. Oh, hey there. Right on. Good stuff. I've always wanted to go to Texas because we're in Calgary and in Alberta and they call us Texas North. But anyway, whatever's up next, it's going to depend on you. I was thinking maybe a series on health and safety committees and how they benefit a health and safety management system. But yeah, not sure. If you guys have any ideas or thoughts or what you'd like to see, let me know in the comments. I'd appreciate it. And so once again, on this final one, questions will be answered in subsequent videos or live streams. Like I said, thank you very much for all of you that have joined, all of you that view the channel, that leave comments and are part of the community I'm trying to form. Like I said, I might have picked a rough night to want to do this with everything that's going on down south. I honestly, God bless you, America. I really hope that this does not lead to anything serious. I hope this is just a bump in the road for you. I really truthfully do. Yeah, because being a safety guy, we care about people. That's just it in a nutshell. So take care, my friends. Do me a favor. Wherever you are, lead by example. Be that person who's going to put on their safety glasses when nobody else does. Be that person who, no matter how hot it is, you're going to wear your hard hat. You're going to go that extra mile to be safe. You're going to, by leading example, provoke safety in others and do that right thing regardless of the situation, okay? Right on. Take care. Bye for now.